After a few years, you learned about it on the dark web.
Bitcoin was just a different industry. It's not about being rich or making money. It's more about I can have something that nobody can take away from me.
The liberal in California is conservative in Canada. So does location of doing business matter?
We had a license from the AMF. They didn't care.
The only place you could actually deal was literally a Telegram group and some people asking for equipment and you don't know if they're real.
Which is we need something decentralized, something that cannot be printed at will. And I think the answer is Bitcoin.
Welcome to my podcast. I'm very happy you made it here this morning. Introduce yourself. Tell me, we just met, honestly.
Right.
And that's why I like the podcasting, because I can meet people, I can talk to them, and I can share the story with other people and, of course, learn something from them. So you mentioned you were born not in Canada. Tell me, where are you from?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be here, especially on this third day of the Bitcoin conference after 3 days of working hard and playing hard. Not sponsored by Red Bull, but pretty close to that. I'm not. Well, we know each other indirectly. We've spoken over
Right.
The phone a couple of times, and obviously we've did business with your company at some point. But I live in Canada. I wasn't born in Canada. I was born in Kazakhstan, in that little town that everybody's mining Bitcoin now in. I was not part of that at all. I grew up in Argentina, actually. I lived there until I was 10. My parents escaped the post-Soviet sort of space from Kazakhstan, from all those countries. Was definitely not a nice place to live. So we moved to Argentina, just like working class family, nothing crazy. Moved to Canada when I was 10. I had vivid memories of like moving to Canada. I looked at a map. I'm like, okay, well, this is pretty close to the US.
Yeah,
I'm like,
it all what matters, right?
it's all that matters, American dream, or at least pretty close to it.
Yeah.
Moved to Canada, learned about Bitcoin in 2015. I was in university. Was
Pretty
right.
early.
Yeah.
Pretty early. So it was how did you learn about it? Was it like, just you were in the games or online something? Because that's usually when the online games were popular and people talked about Bitcoin in the chats there.
No, I didn't get through gaming. I was writing a research paper for one of my classes, and I wanted to quote. It was about World War II, right? So I wanted to write something, and I was looking for a reference, and somebody said, "Oh, you have to find this book." And so I Googled the book, and I can find it in the library. I can find it in the university library. I can find it in public sale. Obviously, it's not a good book. It's Mein Kampf by Hitler.
Wow.
But I was writing a research project on World War II, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna quote that book. I'm like, okay, well, fuck, I can find the book. So I go on Facebook and I just, make a post like, hey, where can I find this book? Like, I need it for research. And somebody says, go on the dark web. I'm like, what the
Unbelievable.
I'm like, what is that? Dark web. So I Google dark web and I see this thing, Tor, and I'm like, what is this? And I was studying, I had a class in computer science, so I was already a little bit interested. So I start digging a little bit deeper, how these layers work and onions, whatever it was. And I get on this website called Alphabay, and they're selling these drugs and stuff and guns, whatever. And
the
just
book?
no, online on the website.
But what about the book? Did you get the book?
Oh no, I never got the book. Everything but the book,
Oh my God.
But it just piqued my curiosity. I'm like, how can people sell guns online? I mean, I'm from Canada, right? Right. Guns are illegal there. It's a big no-no. It's not deregulated or anything. I'm like, of course, you can trace money, but how do people get paid for drugs and they keep selling it? Are they stupid? And I see that there's not a single dollar sign around. It's all about Bitcoin. And I wasn't about drugs. I don't take drugs, by the way, anything of the sort, but it just sort of piqued my curiosity. And I see this thing called Bitcoin. So I read the white paper. I was still living with my parents back then. Go in the basement. I read the white paper. I started looking into everything about Bitcoin. And back then, my business partner, who is still my business partner today, we were coding a platform for clinics in Canada. So, Canada has free healthcare, so technically has no healthcare. But and clinics, was no such thing as seeing a doctor 10 minutes after you walk in. You had to come in if you didn't have an appointment. So you would come in and wait for like 8 hours. And if you're lucky enough, you're going to see a doctor by the end of the day. So we were coding this platform that lets you come in, pay $4, put your phone number, and you can, step out, go do your stuff. And as the line progresses, it would send you text messages. So when there's like 2 people ahead of you instead of like 12, you can just, go back to the clinic and don't spend your whole day waiting there, because this was a real problem, especially back in 2015. So I learned everything I could about Bitcoin, and I go see Drago, and I'm like, Drago, I like found out about this thing. It's crazy. This is the future of money. Like it's decentralized, and there's a limited amount of
And which year was that already when you started like thinking about putting this into business?
2016. So this was 2016.
So after a few years, you learned about it on the dark web.
Yeah. So I learned about it that time. I bought a little bit, like $200 in an ATM.
Did you use the Mt. Gox?
No, I've never used any of the marketplaces or anything. I just bought the Bitcoin. I thought it was cool. So I was listening to like podcasts and people talking about it, and it kind of like stayed there.
Well, it's interesting that you learned about Bitcoin in a bad way. It's like, if you tell this story and we cut it here, people gonna say, well, that's what Bitcoin is used for.
Yeah.
Only for bad stuff and, drugs and illegal stuff. But we've came so far from where you learned about it years ago to where we are right now, where we're right now sitting with you at the Bitcoin conference. And it's probably one of the largest Bitcoin conferences I've been to. It's like 30,000 people showed up. A lot of politicians were there. We had a vice president coming, J.D. Vance, talking about Bitcoin. So from a legal website to a major conference where we had last year former president, this year he's a president, Donald Trump speaking, and now we have vice president coming speaking, and other people. What does it tell you? What does it tell you that because I haven't learned about Bitcoin that early. I learned about it in 2017. But do you see the change and the reason Bitcoin became so popular from the time you learned about it to where we are now?
I don't think it's correlated to why people were. Well, maybe there is a correlation, but definitely Bitcoin today and Bitcoin in 2015 is not the same. It's not the same thing. It's not the same crowd. I wasn't there for the technology, and I'm also interested in economics and things like that, privacy. So it got popular in those days because people were looking for an alternative that raised that actually sort of addressed those underlying privacy concerns. And, obviously those people were using it for doing bad stuff. Right?
Yes.
But it doesn't necessarily mean because you are doing bad stuff and somebody's doing good stuff that they should also not be entitled to have privacy and financial freedom and not being tied to a monetary system that is fully centralized through banks and all that stuff. So at the end of the day, we're all humans and we all deserve the same liberties. I think that was just the starting point, and people found that use case, which initially was not necessarily something good. But other people heard about it, and I'm not saying that people who have used or consumed any sort of substance and intrinsically bad, but some of them are good people, and they also learn about this thing, right? So Bitcoin has come a long way, and I'm happy it's not attributed to those types of things anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Very happy about that, of course.
It's been a long path, I'll be honest with you. There has been a lot of fight about Bitcoin and its use cases in the last couple of years, and now obviously we have a new political environment in America, and it definitely helps for the industry to explode in a good way, because there are so many good players in the industry who have been building good products, but they became a victim of that mentality that, hey, Bitcoin is used as a means to sell drugs and guns, right? And that's been a long, long time ago. And that's like the same. The guns were used to, could be used to make war, could be protect yourself. But going to your use cases that you've been working on Bitcoin. You just mentioned, so you started a company that was like working on medical. I guess it's a line. It's a software that was integrated with the hospitals. How did you get into actually being where you are right now, doing a Bitcoin business where you sell crypto mining equipment and you do a lot of other things with crypto mining, because you got to the roots of Bitcoin itself. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So we were coding this platform, and obviously we had an integration with a POS system, a payment terminal, right? Pretty much like a Moneris or Chase system where you just can use your credit card for payments, debit cards, and we were looking at ways how we can actually be part of this industry, and we ended up partnering up with a company called 34 Bytes. Was based out of LA. Steven Karlsgott was the founder. I remember this vividly. And we started distributing these payment terminals across Canada, so people could take payments in Bitcoin.
In Bitcoin,
Yes,
wow.
end of 2016.
So you were actually putting together the white paper to work in Canada so early.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah, we distributed a bunch of those. Nobody ever used them. We had like 3 transactions, but the beauty of it was the merchant was could get paid at the end of the day in fiat currency. So the idea was to allow these merchants to be paid in something alternative. We obviously wanted to capitalize the business. Wasn't working out too well. And then what happened is the system got developed in such a way that it became a POS terminal, and they integrated an infrared QR code scanner, supposedly to facilitate payments. But what we figured out is, well, suddenly this is a way cheaper Bitcoin ATM that you don't need to pay $3,000 for. It only costs about $100 to produce. So we went back to the same guys. We're like, forget about it, taking payments. People want to buy and sell their Bitcoin. Do you want to be a point of sale, essentially, where people can come and buy and sell their Bitcoin? Everybody was like, oh, yeah, this is amazing, but I don't want to put any money for that. So we're like, all right, if we're going to risk our own money, let's do it somewhere where at least it's not going to get, nobody's going to get robbed. So we partnered with a currency exchange in Montreal, and then another one in Toronto. We supplied them with liquidity and started advertising, hey, we buy and sell Bitcoin.
And that's still 2016, 2017.
That's 2017, late 2017, I would say. So we had people walk into our stores. The clerk would give us a call. Hey, can you give me a quote? They're buying this much, that much. And, 2017, I think, and 2017, beginning 2018, the industry just exploded. And all these capital started flowing in, and all those guys now didn't want to use like paper currency. They wanted to do wire transfers. So we opened a bank account. And, speaking of, coming in from those early days, you had no friends in banking. Banks didn't want to bank you. So we were essentially surfing the bank wave until like the bank figured out that we're buying and selling Bitcoin. So we got our accounts closed a couple of times. And there was, we had a license, actually. We were a licensed dealer in Canada. We had a license from the AMF, which is
so it's like money service business, like in America?
An MSB, yeah, correct. So,
it's interesting that you said about banking, closing banking. My company has been dealing with crypto mining. So we didn't do like payment processing. And yet we received the letter from Bank of America, I think early 2018, where they asked, are you guys a money service business? And we filled out all the surveys and all the questions they had. And obviously we were not a money service business, because all what we did were selling crypto mining equipment to the users, as well as building infrastructure to put the equipment to work. And yet they shut down all the bank accounts. So in your case, you actually were a money service business, and they still shut you down.
Yeah, they didn't.
It's crazy.
They didn't care. So yeah, and then eventually, that became a real O2C desk. We developed some pretty good relationships with liquidity providers, and we started running wire transfers instead of dealing with physical currency, which is not a scalable industry, not a scalable business. I'm sorry, but that was 2018. And then I had a friend from high school. Maybe you know him, Vlad, from ASIC Exchange.
I do know him.
Yeah, we're from the same city. So he comes to me and he's like, I just started, selling these ASICs, and can you convert this, amount of money for me? I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, send me the funds, and we'll send you the Bitcoin, And he sends a certain amount, and he's like, yeah. So I'm like, oh, nice. So this is how much you sold for? He's like, no, that's my profit. I'm like, that Wolf of Wall Street scene, like, prove me it's real, and I'll go, go. So
and I'll quit my job right now, right?
Yeah.
Show me what you do, and I'll quit my job right now.
And I was like, wow, this is so interesting. Plus, I was already like passionate about mining. I was reading all about like mining.
You already know a lot about the industry in general. You are a Bitcoin basically guy from early on. and now you learn about the whole concept of mining through this friend of yours.
Yeah. I mean, we were already dealing with miners. Miners had to liquidate their.
Oh, they were your customers.
Yeah, we had a bunch of miners as clients, and he was also just starting out. So I said, hey, let's do something together. So we, kind of partnered up. We're part of this company called Kaboom Rikes back then, which I think there was only like 2 companies or 3 companies, buying and selling.
I wouldn't call it companies. They were like Telegram groups.
Yeah.
Where people were sharing information and asking, what do you have? I have this. And then you said, yes, I have it, but doesn't mean you had anything. You had to run to some other guy and actually buy it from it. Because we started as well as a distributor of crypto mining equipment. But that business was so complicated and so, I'll be honest with you, shady, because the only place you could actually deal was literally a Telegram group and some people asking for equipment, and you don't know if they're real, that you're going to get scammed or not, even though you are selling the equipment, right? Because some at the beginning, as far as I remember, I'm not sure you have probably the same story. We had to sell equipment through eBay, and on eBay we were paid in PayPal, but PayPal had a policy that you can actually get the freeze the transaction within 180 days if the customer filed a complaint. And there were a lot of scams going on because people bought stuff on eBay, equipment was shipped, they already been using the equipment to mine Bitcoin, and in 6 months you can mine a lot of Bitcoin. And then they will open a claim and say, you know what, this equipment didn't work. And eBay will always gonna go with the customer. Well, in my experience, at least. So it's interesting that you actually went through the same path that we did.
Yeah. We never sold actually anything on eBay. We were always B2B, direct to the customer, mainly dealing in wire transfers. So we didn't have that, fortunately, that intermediary in the middle. But nevertheless, it was and still is a risky industry. There's so many scams going on, and to this day, you see like on these Telegram channels, people still get scammed for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Either they don't get the hardware at all, or they get stuff that doesn't work, complete, garbage. This happens all the time. It's a difficult industry. We've put a lot of effort in curating this network of reliable partners to work with, and that has a lot of value. Some of the new guys, or even some of the existing miners, sometimes they want to get that 10 cents, 20 cents per terahash off for their hardware, say $5,000 on a $1 million deal or whatever, and then what happens is they work with these quote unquote brokers that have nothing behind them, have no reputation, have not been vetted by the industry, have no capital. You cannot even go after them. Some of them are not even in the US.
How do you describe your business, Arty? Is it brokerage? Is it wholesale? How would you call it?
Wholesale brokerage.
Yeah, both of those.
Yeah, I mean, we don't like to hold too much hardware these days.
Yeah.
It's so volatile. Already the industry is up and downs. At the end of the day, you gotta pay the bills. You gotta pay your employees. Hardware depreciates, appreciates. We used to speculate on it and just buy, store it in a warehouse and sell it as the market was progressing. Works on the way up. It's not your friend on the way down.
So it's interesting that you learned about Bitcoin as an internet money while looking for the book you needed for your research. Then you got to actually build a payment system on Bitcoin. So you followed all steps in white paper. And then eventually you came to a business, which is hardware, which is a hard business. Hardware is hard, as they say. It's logistics, it's inventory, it's employees, it's shipping. Do you miss those old days of P2P transactions? Strike, Jack Mallers, Strike is doing very well, and they are specifically doing transactions. You apparently had the same idea, but just way earlier.
I miss it because of nostalgia. Bitcoin was just a different industry, back then. It was, you're passionate about the technology and you're passionate about financial freedom. And when I say financial freedom, it's not about being rich or making money. It's more about I can have something that nobody can take away from me, right? Which is a fundamental human right, in my opinion. It's just like it was more cypherpunkish in my opinion. And now it's just a big industry. It's not that codes. There's more than 30,000 people showed up at the Bitcoin conference today. That's crazy. I miss it more for just being part of it in the early days. Everybody who from back then are friends now, and it's a long time. It's 10 years ago. I was not even 20 actually when I started.
Wow.
But the payment industry and the Bitcoin, the OTC desks and all that stuff, it's a very difficult part of the industry to be in. You need banking relationships. You need good lawyers. You need much more funding. Even back then, you needed way more funding to do that than to run a hardware business. Because just writing that document for the regulatory body, showing them how you're doing your KYC, how you're making sure that your clients are not doing money laundering or any sort of funding terrorist activities, or not on sanctioned lists. That's a 40-50 page document that you have to pay someone to write. When you're 21, 22, it's 2017, 2018, whatever. You don't have $50,000 just to drop on that because you think it's going to blow up. And I don't. I'm from Montreal, I'm not from San Francisco, right? Where you can just, go and find your way to VCs or interest or angel investors. It's a bit of a different place to start a business in, right? Plus, it's Canada is not as business friendly as the US, obviously. So a little bit of a different mentality, different culture there. So I don't have any regrets moving on from that space.
You mentioned that Canada is not San Francisco. I wanna kind of ask you something about it. So does location of doing business matter?
Less so when you're in Bitcoin because it's international, it's over the internet. Um, it's a smaller industry where people can still figure out who you are and get to the bottom of things sooner or later. So if somebody's not a good person to interact with, a lot of people are gonna know about that. So um, in terms of building a network, in terms of meeting like-minded people, it's different. It's a different business culture. It's less business oriented. Um, there is no, I would say, common objective from a, I would say, a societal standpoint, right? Like sometimes societies have common objectives, like let's be number one, let's be number one in this, let's do this or that. Canada's a bit more laid back, I would say. So, and Toronto is a business hub. Toronto is a little bit different than Montreal. But nevertheless, I mean, obviously there's way more opportunities in America, And when I say San Francisco, I mean, I just said that because that's where all the VCs or,
Right, right.
yeah.
I have been hearing this more and more, and myself, I'm experiencing this, that I can see that location actually matters. Not only like being in America, of course. Of course, if being in America is a big privilege, in my opinion. I'm an immigrant myself, and I think this is definitely a big privilege to be here and do business here. It's a very business friendly country. But at the same time, what matters going forward is people. You want to surround people around yourself who help you grow. Common objective, to your point, is very important, and it starts from a company. It starts from a family. It starts from then in the company. You have to have employees who have a common objective. You yourself actually feed that objective from the industry around you, and then you grow, grow, grow. And in some areas, even in America, you don't see this. But in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco area, even though there's been a lot of bad press around the city's dying, innovation is still coming out of it. AI is very hot. You don't see AI companies popping up, in Chicago, Arizona, or Montreal. I mean, they are popping up out of San Francisco. So there is still a huge hub of innovation, and it's curious that you feel the same by actually living in a different country, that you lack that common mentality to get to a higher higher heights, because like especially in crypto, it's very, very conservative industry. Even though it's a libertarian industry, it's still very conservative. There's like a group of people who got into this in 2017, 2018, and it's very hard to get in right now, I'll be honest with you. Um, so with all of that, I want to ask you a question. It's very popular, maybe political, maybe offending you, but I really want to ask you. So there is a big conversation in our political environment in America for Canada to become a 51st state. I do not know what you think about it, so I would like to ask you, what do you think? Would you agree with that if you were asked and if there would be a referenda to do that?
Yeah, that's definitely a hot topic these days. I think, look, I think Trump raised a fundamentally interesting question, a philosophical question, which is, if you cannot um, sustain your own sovereignty by yourself economically through military means, are you really a sovereign um, state? And that's just, I don't. It's not a yes or no in my mind. It's just, it raised a question, and I'm still thinking about that. Because throughout um, history, countries were invaded, divided, they fought wars, they had some sort of a military, there were, causes and consequences to those things. And thankfully, those things died down, with the exception of the, unfortunate, stuff that's going on in Ukraine and Russia. But, I think the world is a more peaceful place these days. But that still doesn't eliminate the fact of, if you cannot support your sovereignty through your own means, you are really at the mercy of whoever your neighbor is. And when your neighbor is a big, strong superpower, you start thinking about those things. I think from an economic perspective, well, first of all, culturally, Canada and the US, they're very similar. They're very, very similar. Um, from an economic perspective, I think it makes sense. I think it makes sense to have a North America, not as a continent, but as a place. I think it makes sense because Canada has a lot of untapped resources. We have a lot of regulation, a lot of red tape. It's very hard to do business in certain sectors in the country. The U.S. is notoriously less regulated for those types of things. Whether that's good or bad, that's a matter of personal opinion. But Canada has a very educated population, very hardworking, very, very similar history as the United States. It's a country that has issued from immigration throughout the years. We've been always good neighbors, except a couple wars that were fought a few hundred years ago. I think it's something to look into, and even if it's not some sort of union, maybe there could be some sort of like borderless type of trade activity, maybe freedom of movement type of thing that could benefit both societies, both economically. Politically, I don't know. I mean, Canada's way more liberal than probably the most liberal places in America. So it depends how you feel about that.
I had a friend, and a friend, a business partner, and he's from Canada. He moved to California, and I asked him a question: why did you move to California? I mean, it's a liberal state, and he said, "I'm moving out of Canada because I don't like the bureaucracy. It's so liberal and other things." Regardless of your political views, by the way. And he's like, guys, he tells me, liberal in California is conservative in Canada.
This is so funny. I'm staying in Orange County now.
Okay.
I'm staying in Orange County. I've been there for a few months. And I tell my friends the same thing. If California was a province, it would be like Alberta. It would be probably the most conservative, or one of the most conservative provinces if it was a province.
That's interesting. This argument, in Canada, well, in America, obviously was on the news all over the place, right? And it also influenced the elections in Canada because there's, as far as I understand, a new prime minister. I'm not very, very familiar with the politics there, but as far as I understand, the new prime minister is also liberal, right? And they are against, obviously, the 51 state. So the point is that that this argument brought up, and Trump is the guy who likes to make news all the time. The point is, I think the message was right, but the delivery was a little bit hectic. That what you mentioned, and I'm taking off your words, not of mine. If you are a sovereign country, if you call yourself a sovereign country, that you have to be able to sustain yourself, to sustain your your borders, to sustain your country, you sustain your people, and be sure that you can protect them. And if you can do it, well, then it's a question, right? Like how sovereign you are. And that's the argument they have in European Union, because a lot of countries in European Union are dependent basically on three major economies: Germany, France, and Italy. And a lot of people like not happy. Well, a lot of people in Germany and France are not happy that they are basically subsidizing out the countries. But I think that the topic about Canada and America being more merged as a economic power, going to be even more hot very, very soon, because as you mentioned, there's a lot more energy and interconnections already. Even electrical infrastructure is interconnected with Canadian infrastructure. American electrical infrastructure interconnected with Canadian infrastructure. And there was some fight kind of about not delivering electricity to America, and that was an interesting thing to observe. So getting from political from politics a little bit off to the ground and to our stuff, is mining a good business to be in 2025?
I think if you do it right, it's a good business. Now, I think it's a good business if you're able to do it at scale, because obviously, and you know this better than I do, mining at scale is in a sense easier than mining at home. We don't necessarily work with retail customers, but we do get phone calls, from time to time. Hey, should I get into mining? I mean, look, if you're able to secure a 20 megawatt power purchase agreement, you can get down, to the bottom rate, which is directly correlated to the profitability of your operation. If you're paying 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour, it might make all the difference versus if you're paying 6.5 cents, or even, the difference becomes even more substantial in a sense. The impact of the difference becomes more substantial the lower that the Bitcoin price is trading, or the higher that the difficulty is. It's hard to get access to those rates if you're operating at a smaller scale. So if you have access to energy, you have access to land, you have access to capital. I think it's a phenomenal industry. I think, PE ratios, or, a typical business, you would try to make back your money, like, I don't know, with a restaurant, maybe, 10 years, maybe 8 years in a good case. Some industries take longer. Bitcoin mining is one of those, industries where, we have clients in 2020, they purchased S19s from us in October. By February, they made back their investment, and this is still possible if you do it right, if you time your entry into the business, if you know what you're doing, you work with the right partners, you don't get scammed buying hardware from, random people on Telegram. You can probably set yourself up for a good amount of success.
So you see, this is the argument I have. I've been in the crypto mining industry for 8 years, and I've learned over time that the Bitcoin mining is not a business; it's an investment. You, on the other hand, in your answer, you mentioned it's a business and they made return on their investment. So if it's an investment, then there is way more risk that you have to consider. Speaking about the restaurant, you can hedge the risk by having good food, good location, a couple other things. But in Bitcoin mining, we have something we don't control, which is price of Bitcoin. And that price may go up, may go down. And there's an argument, this is the oil is also a commodity, but oil is needed to keep the economy running. What if Bitcoin not going to be used this much as we anticipated, or as Satoshi Nakamoto envisioned? How will mining do in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, if you look at what's happening in the debt markets, I think we're seeing a de-dollarization happen as well. Fortunately or unfortunately, whatever you think about it. I think people are tired of getting debased all the time. People are tired of the Federal Reserve just decreasing interest rates, or having running all these like QE programs. And as we've seen happen in 2020, 2021, everybody thinks, oh, housing prices went up because everybody moved out of, California into my town. But that's not necessarily the whole truth, right? House prices went up because interest rates went down, because so much money was injected into the economy. And that is not supposed to happen. If you look at what the purchasing power of the dollar was 60 years ago versus what it is today, that's not something that that limits the, as I said at the beginning of the show, the financial freedom, the freedom of knowing that your uh, unit of currency today is going to be worth the same thing as it is tomorrow. It shouldn't work against you, in a sense. And Bitcoin allows for that not to happen. It's limited in quantity. There's not more than a certain amount that's going to be ever out there in circulation. It allows for borderless payments. It allows for instant settlements. And in today's age, that's important. And some people say, well, gold is the answer to that. Well, I think gold was the answer to that for thousands of years or hundreds of years. But as a society, we developed, and now we are fully online on the internet. We are an international you know group of people that can now interact between each other without having to go through 10 different intermediaries, through banks, figuring out Swift banking codes.
Any
And
cryptocurrency can do that, Arty.
well, I mean, look, sure. Also, you can print, draw anything on a piece of paper and say,
Sure,
well, that's the new US dollar, or that's the new currency, right? It's a question of how many people accept it, how many people
So
think,
is it belief?
oh, well, absolutely.
So it's interesting that you mentioned about belief. I was at this talk yesterday where Peter Schiff, a big gold maxi, was talking about Bitcoin, and he's against Bitcoin, and at the same time he's kind of in it. I think he's getting very popular because of Bitcoin. And Peter was saying that Bitcoin's value is purely based on belief, and it's not enough to have all those use cases when there is only one thing that puts it together, which is a belief. And there's, of course, there could be arguments, but what do you think about that? What would you tell him?
Well, gold is also based on belief. The US dollar is based on belief, right? If you're buying treasury bonds, it's because you believe that the US economy is going to, do good over the next several years. If you're buying gold, it's because you believe something is going to happen where the value of that gold is going to increase compared to, your base unit of currency that you're. Bitcoin is the same thing. And like my answer to Peter would be that we're not talking about three people believing that Bitcoin is the answer. We're talking about millions and millions and tens of millions of people thinking and understanding Bitcoin. And this is not the belief of one person. This is the belief of a lot of people. And that's what makes it real. And this is not different than gold. This is gold on steroids.
Okay. So you learned about white paper very early. In Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper, there's nothing about gold. It's P2P transaction. It's internet cash. It's P2P transactions. Uh, Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter, now the founder of Twitter, founder of Square, Block, there's so many companies he founded, has a vision that Bitcoin has to become a currency for it to survive. You mentioned just multiple times that it's gold and steroids. But if it's gold, are we in line with what Satoshi envisioned?
Yeah, well, I think if you ask yourself the question, what is a currency? It's just an accounting ledger, right? That determines the amount of effort or value that you have put into something and you use it for trade, right? It's just an intermediary. Like before, people used to trade fur for vegetables or whatever else, fur for
Yeah, it's legal tender.
exactly. So then banknotes, currency as we know today, replaced that because you didn't have to carry, 10 bags of apples to buy an orange or like, whatever it
It's
is.
a good deal. I'll take that deal all day long. 10 bags of apples.
Totally.
There's a Satoshi white paper which says we have to have a digital currency. It will substitute the US dollar across the world. What you're saying is, well, it is a currency, but at the same time, it's a gold. So we need to. I think we as an industry need to understand and realize what are we building, because if we it's a common vision, as you mentioned. If we're gonna lose the vision a little bit, there will become more, forks of Bitcoin, in my opinion. Because if we want this industry and Bitcoin itself to be widely used, we need to understand what we want it to be. Is it a gold? Is it currency? Is it both? Because like if you go to this conference that we were here with you, I mean, you can see the slogan everywhere: "Never sell your Bitcoin."
Mhm.
You never see this thing in a Satoshi white paper, because in the Satoshi white paper it says it's going to be peer cash, digital money. Then we have Jack Dorsey again, who's saying, "Guys, we have to figure out how to make this money."
You're totally right. I mean, I think the narrative has changed over the years. It used to be, yeah, let's use Bitcoin for trading, for buying and selling stuff. And then as the values started increasing aggressively, suddenly it became a, quote unquote store and value, store of value. But I don't think they're mutually exclusive. It can be a store of value and a, unit of exchange. But it does have deeper implications, I think, from an economic perspective. And I think, that's something I think about sometimes, driving back home from the office. If we have a currency that is not that is limited in supply, what are the incentives for economic production, right? If I can just hold on to something and because
Right.
of scarcity is going to increase.
Yeah, that's the issue we have with Bitcoin.
I, look, it doesn't mean we cannot have separate rails for payment or use maybe uh, different accounting methods. But at the end of the day, I think it raises a fundamentally important question: is what is Bitcoin going to be in 20 years? What if the
Yes.
value is $1 million, and now everybody just thinks that's a get rich quick scheme? I mean, not that they already don't, right?
It's true.
I think those are things that you kind of want to live and see how they unfold. I think sooner or later people will have to start using something different than these currencies issued uh, by governments, by states. People want to have something that does not restrict them in any sort of manner. And Bitcoin is the answer. Maybe you're gonna say, well, people use USDT more than they do Bitcoin for payments.
Right.
I think that's true today. People use,
Especially in Argentina, actually. I have a friend who lives in Argentina. He said he pays with Tether for everything.
yeah, that's true. But the thing is, Tether is pegged to the US dollar.
Right.
And at the end of the day, if people keep liquidating their bonds and they lose trust in the US dollar, what's gonna be next? USD, yuan, or USD
Oh,
peso?
absolutely. They'll absolutely
Like
gonna
we're
be.
gonna run out. We're gonna run out of options.
Yeah.
So it all leads to the same, sort of focal point, which is we need something decentralized, something that cannot be printed at will. And I think the answer is Bitcoin.
And on that note, thank you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Appreciate your time. Where people can find you?
Well, people can find me a little bit everywhere, but email asicjungle.com for our website, artem.b@asicjungle.com. I mean, we're there. Would be happy.
We'll leave the links to your website and to your social media in the description. Thank you for watching. This was a conversation with Arty, who is real OG of Bitcoin. You guys better check it out.
Thank you, Sergey.
Thank you, Arty. It's amazing.
Yeah.